A lot of new hubbub and info has come out about the latest version of ChatGPT and its ability to write code. So we're looking at the Strawberry version or O1 preview. Going to be working on a project that I've already started and getting some help from GPT-01, and we'll see like kind of how this goes. So I've asked it, what's the best way that I can give it a code base. It's still disappointing to me that I cannot give the complete code base, that I'm going to have to be kind of, chopping up bits and sending in bits of code as it goes. But that's not, a huge limitation for something as small as the project I'm working on. On a larger project, it would be pretty troublesome. One of the main annoyances is that I have to write out exactly what I'm wanting, and often not the fact that I have to write it out, because I generally plan it out on my own, but I have to write out a lot more detail, and I have to think things through to ask the system what I need and what I'm instructing it to do. Whereas if I was actually writing the code directly, I wouldn't have to go through kind of so much of this. And in fact, you're going to see me like copy and pasting, like I just did, pieces of code that are going in here, or at least, my data structures, etc. Because I'm building on top of an existing code base, I mean, this is critical. There's really no way around it. And maybe you could consider this as, hey, if I was handing this off to a junior dev, I'd have to go through some of this process. However, if I was handing it off to a junior dev, there'd be a lot more communication that would happen in less time. It just takes a while to kind of write this stuff up, to rethink it. I'm rethinking it in terms of what ChatGPT is going to understand and the best way to get my result from that, rather than the sort of less precise yet no less effective way of giving something to a junior dev. One of the things I know that's going to happen when I'm working with ChatGPT is I'm going to have to be very specific on the data structures that I want. Otherwise, it's going to kind of make stuff up. And my experience has been I don't really get the data structures that I want when ChatGPT invents them full cloth. So maybe this time around it would be a little bit better with this new model. But at this point, I'm still not trusting it. I'm going through and saying, hey, here's what the data look like. Here's what the data mean, and how the structure is from whether it's a tuple or a struct. One thing I've noticed, and you'll see this a little bit later on, is that I'm actually able to count on it to understand to a certain extent when I have well-named fields in a struct. Granted, in this project, the structs are relatively simple, but when I have well-named fields and I have well-named structs, it kind of understands, and I don't have to be super precise in how I refer to a struct. And to be honest, like if I had to, it would be way easier to just simply write the code than to describe it to ChatGPT. In case you had not guessed it yet, I'm creating an application for a device that is going to be using nerves, and it's going to control my sprinkler system. So I'm defining, again, these very specific data structures, and I just want to make sure that I put them in correctly, and I don't make it, guess anything. I'm giving it some examples here, and I will give it some additional examples later on. But I'm about to the point where I'm going to ask it to write the code. So first time out of the box here, you can see, it didn't work right away. So I'm going to regenerate. In past models, regeneration was almost a sign that like you need to start over, you need to redefine things, and you probably weren't going to get a better result. In this case, hey, I actually get some code. It actually looks, pretty good. A lot of stuff is relatively well named and consistent. It's using my keys and my maps to show, as variables, etc., just to make everything, quite readable and to keep it relatively tight. It does kind of build functions that don't completely follow kind of that single responsibility principle that I requested. And so you're going to see that, yeah, it does break out some private functions here, but some of the other functions that it builds are, yeah, they're really long and they're a little hard to follow. So not as readable as I would like it to be. I'll maybe take a look at this later and ask it to refactor its code and be more strict on using the single responsibility principle in a function just to make it easier to read and to break out. Here I'm using a feature or a tool provided by Elixir, which is the language that we're using here. And one of my favorite, it's called Livebook. And it allows me to create sort of notebooks. It's like similar to Jupyter notebooks if you're familiar with Python or familiar with Jupyter notebooks for that matter. It's an easy way to really sort of create snippets of code or pieces of code just to test them out, see if they're working the way you want them to. I copied over some of the data from another live book. Again, it's actually the same project. It's just the part of the project that I started before I started working with ChatGPT, just to get us started. And I've copied in the actual like fuzzy input calculator that was what I was building in the first place over from ChatGPT, which may be a little difficult to follow. These warnings are not a big deal. It's simply some things that I was doing previously, and I kind of switched gears before I filled in and started using those variables. And you're going to see that it's pretty easy to just like copy and paste stuff in here. And if I go in the right order, I can evaluate the information. It did kind of do this annoying thing where it truncated my forecast data, but I brought it in from ChatGPT again, where I had copied and pasted in there. Now you notice that I'm kind of searching through an error. I've got an error in here somewhere. Part of it was I just had not aliased the waterlog, and so when I reevaluate that, I get a different error, which is this date time issue. Now this function does not delete, or this function does not exist in Elixir. You have to do it without the bang at the end. And it has a different sort of structure, but with some pattern matching. That's not too big. That's honestly like, a mistake I might have made on my own, is trying to use a function with a bang that doesn't have it. And so, getting an error there. I'm getting another error, and rather than trying to figure it out myself, let's give it a chance to troubleshoot its own code. It does a reasonably good job. Like, I can't figure out why it would have to troubleshoot its own code, but it does. Like, why is there any errors in it in the first place if it's so freaking smart? Any case, in the end, it does work. I'm getting the structure of the data that I want, and I even tested this to try like different schedule restrictions and so forth, and it worked out. So pretty pleased with the errors, like, and lack thereof, and the results in general.